Hello, everybody. Welcome to SoCal Loopers, and thank you for joining. I think you will be really fascinated by what you hear today. So we also have Bastian Hauck, and you can correct me if I have the names wrong, and Dr. Katarina Braune, who have started the Open Project, which you will hear a whole bunch about. So we're going to go on to our normal disclaimer. The Loop app is a do-it-yourself closed loop algorithm, and while it may seem obvious, please consult your healthcare professionals regarding your diabetes management. Important, please understand that this project is highly experimental and is not US FDA approved for therapy. Therefore, you take full responsibility for building and running this system, and you do so at your own risk. Okay, here we go. Strong recommendations from SoCal Loopers to all loopers. If you are looping happily, and I'm assuming most of you are, it's a great idea to check in to SoCal Loopers for critical updates and information, such as iOS updates, when you should do it and when you shouldn't, time change issues, etc. It's helpful, and so please set your Facebook SoCal Loopers notification to highlights. That will allow any mentions of you to show up in your notifications, and also any important announcements. So I'm going to talk a little bit before we go on to the main events today, and I want to take in a moment of appreciation. I am continually amazed at the energy, the time, the kindness, the technical knowledge, and the efforts of our community, and in particular, the admins for SoCal Loopers. Behind the scenes, these folks answer posts, they help, they mentor loopers, they troubleshoot loop issues, they post solutions and alerts, they try to help with improvements to loop docs, they share their knowledge on looping and eating and apps and way more, including the inadvertent FaceTime calls. We are all so much better for having this community with these folks. So I'll just shout them out, and they're not all on today, but Kenny Fox, Mark Oldham, Glenn Weber, Carol Vachon, Priscilla Fogel, Sarah Goya, and Cassidy Robinson. An amazing group. They are all admins on this group because we think you deserve a whole lot of attention, and that's what we do the best we can. And one final note, please. Sorry about that. Our world and our country has been in an extraordinary turmoil. Not my dog, but I want to thank you all on SoCal Loopers for keeping your posts on topic and avoiding personal opinions or frustrations in our group. We look forward to calmness, to a return to normal life. Just thank you for helping us maintain a good place to share about loop and life with looping and diabetes. Very much appreciate that. So we're going to start off today. I'm going to tell you about all our speakers, and then we will start with one with us. Bastian Hauck, please make sure I'm saying that right, and Dr. Katarina Braune started the Open Project to bring together an international intersectoral consortium of patient innovators, clinicians, social scientists, computer scientists, and patient advocacy organizations to establish an evidence base surrounding the impact of DIY or do-it-yourself artificial pancreas systems for people with diabetes, and also in the wider healthcare system environment. Bastian is a powerful patient voice and strategic business consultant with experience in advocacy, politics, and healthcare. He's an economist and diplomat by training, which means he will be diplomatic today. Bastian is the founder of #DeDoc, which is a diabetes online community, and the #DeDoc Voices Scholarship Program, which empowers an international network of patient advocates to attend scientific conferences and collaborate with researchers in industry. As CEO of DeDoc Labs, he specializes in providing patient-centric, user-driven consultancy services in healthcare communications, strategy, and policy. He serves on the board, there's more, but I'll keep going. He serves on the board of Diabetes DE, I don't know who that's, I think that's Germany, IDF Europe, and Beyond Type 1, and acts as a co-lead of the EU-funded Open Project. And he strongly believes, I think as most of us do, in the core principle of peer support. You pay it forward. Dr. Katarina Braune is a type 1 diabetic plus a physician in Berlin, a digital clinician scientist at the Berlin Institute of Health, global diabetes advocate and spokesperson. She co-chairs the Hacking Health Berlin, doesn't that sound interesting? Focus on open source and patient-centered innovation in healthcare, and a proud owner of a do-it-yourself artificial pancreas. We are loaded today. This is fabulous. So thank you everyone for being here. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or wherever you are. Katarina and Bastian, bye-bye. Thank you so much, Tim. Hang around. We would love to keep you here. And please, everybody, welcome Katarina and Bastian, so you guys can shout it out.
Thank you very much, Joanne, for the kind introduction. And thank you, Tim, for this super interesting talk. I'm one of your followers. You've been my inspiration for mixing insulins for a while. And what you have shared was very, very interesting. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Hang on. Okay. Bastian and I are presenting on behalf of the Open Project. But first of all, we want to introduce ourselves. So my name is Katarina. I'm based in Berlin, in Germany, and I'm a medical doctor in the Department of Pediatrics at Charité University Hospital in Berlin. And on this picture, you can see me in my natural habitat, which is the pediatric ER. I'm training to become a pediatric endocrinologist, and I live with type 1 diabetes since 2001. Bastian, do you want to say a few words as well?
Sure, although I've already been introduced in the beginning on this very formal side of things with all the hats that I wear, so I'll keep that part very, very short. My name is Bastian, I'm 43, been diagnosed in 1997, so some 20 plus years with diabetes type 1. I founded DeDoc some 10 years ago. I'm on the board of the German Diabetes Association since 7 and IDF Europe, the International Diabetes Federation in Europe, since about 3. I run, as Joanna already said, the DeDoc Voices Scholarship Program and Doc Day at EASD, ATTD, and ISPAT just now recently. You said all that, Joanne. So on the more personal note, I love sailing. I have, as Tim had his cat there, I introduce you to Jamaica, my little boat dog, and I'm actually joining you from Copenhagen, from on board my boat, as you can see. I've been here since May due to COVID and due to work, because I currently work with the Open Project and the Steno Diabetes Center and Copenhagen University. And last important thing for you to know is that I'm actually not looping. I joined the Open Project just before it went live, but more through my role as CEO of DeDoc Labs. I'm more on the management side. I do research on that as well a little bit, but I'm not looping myself. I used to be a big fan of MDI for many years, and I still am. I have switched to pumps very recently, so for less than a year and a half. And I will be talking about that a little bit later on, and when it comes to where does We're Not Waiting go from here, maybe in 2-3 years. Thank you.
So to start with my own closed loop story, as you can see here, I've always wanted to become a pediatrician. This was shortly before I got diagnosed. And on the picture on the right, you can see my first insulin pump, which was a Medtronic 508. And hands up if you still remember those. This was in 2002. I've been, I think, one of the first children that were put on an insulin pump in the hospital where I was treated. And ever since, I've always been an early adopter of technology, very early on the pump, very early on CGM. And when I read the first articles about looping online, it was pretty clear that I wanted to try it. And this day came in 2017, where I became a looper and I set up iOS Loop, which many of you guys are using. On the picture here, you can see me side by side comparing Android APS and Loop. And yeah, since 3 years, I'm looping like you guys, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so you know these pictures, you know these mornings when you wake up and it still doesn't get old, right? Looping is amazing every day, and I think after a year on Loop, I had my A1C checked. That was actually in Orlando in Florida at the ADA conference. And I couldn't believe myself that I finally had an A1C of 5 point something. I would have never believed this would be in the cards for me. Not even as a doctor in pediatric endocrinology, you're always perfect with your own diabetes. My diabetes control was far from this before I started looping. And I switched my setup slightly in 2019. I switched to the Omnipod when it was released. I was actually with Bastian on his boat in Copenhagen at the time, and I became cordless in Copenhagen. And this is the current setup that I'm using with my iPhone and an Omnipod and a Dexcom G6. And currently mixing Leon Jeff and Fiasp inspired by Tim. And Bastian and I became part of the Open project. To give you guys a bit of a background story, I met Shane, who's on the right on this picture, at the Young Leaders in Diabetes leadership training in Australia 7 years ago. And many of us who were youth advocates at the time now are diabetes researchers, work in the industry, work in advocacy organizations. So back then we were not children, but young adults, but I think we've grown into very meaningful roles in the diabetes space now. And about 2 years ago, Shane texted me on Facebook and he said, look, we're both postdoctoral researchers. Don't you want to do something big? Don't we want to do research on DIY looping? And this is how it all started. We were looking for a couple of allies, which we found and handed in a proposal to the European Union, and surprisingly got a €1 million grant. We would have never believed this would have happened, but this is how Open started. And we started up small, and we keep growing and growing. We're now a group of over 30 people and a couple of volunteers, friends, allies joining us, doing research on DIY APS. And here in the picture, you could see a small part of us in the last meeting pre-COVID in Berlin. So these are our friends and allies that we found. You can see Charité University Hospital, where I'm working, is a part of it. Our project coordination is in Dublin with Shane. Then DeDoc, Bastian, is taking care of our entire communication and management. The programmers of Open APS and Android APS are part of the consortium. And then we also found friends and researchers of University of Copenhagen, of the Australian Centre for Behavioral Research in Diabetes, where, for example, Renza Sibiliar is a part of. Steno Diabetes Center Copenhagen became a part of it. And recently, Stanford Medicine also joined us, and we're now in the process of formally onboarding them onto the Open Consortium team. And one grant does not come alone here. We've been able to acquire a bit of other funding as well, and have had great support from other allies, such as the Einstein Center for Digital Future in Berlin and Design It, which are a service design company. And what are we doing at Open? We're trying to translate experience-based evidence from the patient community to academia and industry, and vice versa. We're trying to answer the question of how safe and efficient open source AID is, how it affects the life of the users and their families, you guys, your families, your partners. And we're also working on guidelines for the safe and ethical use for healthcare professionals, but more about that later. And we're doing research about what is driving the community to create these systems, and finally, how we can make diabetes technology suitable and accessible to everyone, because we all know it is not accessible to everyone worldwide at the moment. And we're trying to answer the question what academia, industry, and people with diabetes can learn from each other and how we can achieve common goals. Because you guys know best that DIY is not us versus the industry. We all want safe and accessible systems fast, and we're trying to pave the way to answer that. This is all research according to international standards. So we have IRB and ethics approvals in place. We have a study protocol, which is published open access. And yeah, this is what we're doing at Open. And now I would like to say a few words about why I support looping as a doctor. So I'm putting my DIY hat off and putting my doctor hat on, and I'm being super critical. But here are the reasons why I think us doctors and healthcare professionals should support it. I think it's evidence-based. I think it's safe. I think it's efficient. I think it improves more than just A1Cs and blood sugars. It improves patient-reported outcomes as well. It's personalized, it's free for all, and it's ethical. And now I would like to go through each of the points one by one and share a bit of background. So why do I think it's evidence-based? Well, if you look at the diabetes therapy evolution over time, when do you think the first closed loop system was implemented? It's on the slide. What do you think? Okay, I'll give you a hint. It was in the 70s, and it's the little girl with her, I think it's a puppet or a plush animal or something in the picture here. In the 70s, the first closed loop system was built with an IV drip and a big computer. And of course, in the 70s, computers were not exactly portable, which is why the idea has been omitted for a while and has recently been adopted by industry and research, but the idea is not old. So closed looping is not something that Dana or Pete or the DIY community came up with out of the blue. It's been an old idea in diabetes therapy, and we all knew, even in the 70s, that this is the best, but it has been a long way to finally make a product out of the idea. And why are our devices not perfect is the big question. Well, I think if decisions in research and in the industry are being made, a lot of people are sitting on the table that make the decisions, right? And it's oftentimes about money and about power, but as users and even as doctors, we're not part of the table. And I think if they had the best interests of the patient in mind, we would have been invited to this table a long time ago. And I'm quoting Dana here. Perhaps you've seen her presenting on this before. People always tend to fall into the pitfall of the patient syndrome. And if you know what imposter syndrome is, it's a bit similar. It's when you think you yourself know very little and everyone around you is very clever and they know everything. And patient syndrome is kind of like that, but inverted. It's when people think patients know very little and professionals know a lot, but patients are not stupid, obviously. We're all our own researchers, healthcare professionals, caregivers, our own governments, and so forth. So we know a lot and a bit of everything, which is very special and should not be underestimated. And if you look at how the industry traditionally develops products, it's a very deductive approach, whilst the patient or user-led approach is totally different. We want something that works from the first minute on, and we work collaboratively, transparently, not like it has been done traditionally in research and in the industry, where you not talk about something until you have the final result. And that, by this point, is already outdated. So I think here's a lot that industry and academic research can learn from the patient community here. So why do I think DIY looping is safe, and why do I support this? I think DIY is sometimes a bit of an unfortunate term. If you Google do it yourself, these are the pictures that you might see. But if we're talking about open source, the picture is totally different. So hands up if you guys have used other open source tools than your DIY APS before. I'm sure none of you have felt criminal or dodgy or unsafe using Firefox or Linux. And you can see that the open source alternatives to commercial products are just as good as the commercial alternatives. And you guys know this, DIY loopers developers are not the dangerous people sitting in the basement, hacking insulin pumps. They are people like me and you, and they design their systems for safety. They are caregivers, partners, lovers, allies, friends. They would never do something that put their loved one at risk. And something to consider, it's kind of interesting how safety is evaluated in other areas, right? Outside medical products. If you fly with an airplane to Southern California, for example, you will enter a machine that has been tested for 360 hours only. And the DIY community has many, many, many more hours of experience to evaluate safety. And as you guys know, safety studies are underway. You all know about Tidepool that is at the moment finalizing their FDA-approved product for Loop. And there are also other initiatives that try to make Android APS into an approved product. There's the CREATE trial in New Zealand, for example, and another group around Lenka in Prague that are trying to get open source products approved. And now a few words about efficiency. We're all n equals 1, right? But we are many, and there are many, many hours of experience. And I would like to ask you guys all for a favor, and that is, if you want, share your data with us on Open Humans and share it with the Open APS Data Commons and with the Open Project there. There are many ways how you can share it from all of the 3 systems, disregarding if you're using Open APS, Loop, or Android APS. No matter where you are, even if we're EU funded, we are a global study. So you don't have to be based in Europe to participate. And on our website, which I will show later, there are manuals and tutorials on how you can do this. Let's collect these 25 million hours and show the world how awesome looping is. And here are a couple of results from a survey we have run in 2019, where we asked more than 1,000 people about their pre and post outcomes of looping. And as you can see, the study was very global, with the majority of the people being based in Europe, and all of the 3 systems were in use. And this graph in the background is data from the US-American registry, which is called T1D Exchange. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. And maybe you've seen this super scary graph with A1C on average and age. And this makes me always very, very sad when I see it, because first of all, you can see that people in their teenage years have it the hardest. They have the highest A1Cs, they have a huge burden. And then what you can also see is that only people who have a good A1C make it over the age of 70. I think that's not acceptable. And the red star here is where people started with, and the yellow star is where is the average A1C that they were able to achieve with DIY looping. And as you can see, it's no longer even on the graph. I think that's really awesome. And what's also here is the orange bar, which is the target A1C that international guidelines recommend. And so as you can see, the goal and the reality are very far apart here. And here are time and range data from children before and after looping. And I think this is very interesting, because you can see that some of the children had a very good time and range before they started, but some had quite low numbers, such as 25%, but with DIY looping, everyone was kind of in the same area with 80%, which also by far exceeds the international recommendations for CGM goals. But research is more than just box plots and graphics. And here's a little video of what, conference abstracts and posters cannot visualize. And I hope the audio is coming through. This is Jacob from the UK, who was one of our youngest speakers at a symposium that we held last year in Barcelona. Let me know if you guys can hear the sound.
Right, I'm gonna close my eyes, I'm gonna pull it out.
It might be the wrong one.
Is it the wrong way around?
Yes. Open your eyes.
Pancreas. Oh, cool. Pump, instinct, cartridge, cannula, insulin, strip phone.
I'll start looping today.
Yes.
It's ready.
Is it actually?
Your mum's done a lot of work.
Oh, seriously. Oh my. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I'm speechless.
Not Christmas.
So we all had this moment, right? And we remember it very clear. And at Open, we're interested in these moments, in your experiences, and we're trying to make them somehow available to the science community. Oops. And we've been collecting your stories and have analyzed them. And I would like to share with you guys what we found. So these were the parents and caregivers of children with diabetes, and we asked them, what has DIY looping done for you? And you can see pretty clear that there's one word that really stood out, or two, and that is sleep and time. This is what DIY looping gave the parents back, and this is invaluable. And I would like to share a couple of quotes with you guys that I think really stood out. And this one came from a doctor in Australia. And she said, DIY looping is the only thing I have ever encountered in my 40 years of type 1 diabetes that makes life easier and more fun. Looping requires lots of initial effort, but the benefits are amazing. I am seen as a clever, geeky person, not a victim of diabetes. I've never felt sorry for myself, but other people have. Now they're envious of the fun technology I get to play with. And this one is anonymous, and it says, something that has also influenced me to build a DIY system was the support from the community and the general feeling that the community gives. I felt like I'm part of a big people-powered movement. It feels like a revolution. And this one comes from a parent, and they said, it was a life-defining moment in my life as a parent. No one could stop me giving my child the care they needed anymore, especially not a company who places shareholders above clients. I was no longer at the mercy of markets, profits, politics, and whims. I had the capacity to provide for my own child again. And this one is very powerful as well. This one comes from Finland, and they said, we were waking at 11 p.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m., etc. to manually blood glucose check our daughter. We haven't done that in years. I was having seizures from almost 5 years of not sleeping any more than a couple of hours at the time. Now we all sleep at night. And this is a fun one. And this one says, more beneficial sexual activity, PDE5 inhibitors no longer required. So talking about personalization, as you guys know, one size does not fit all, but the way commercial devices are designed and the way that randomized controlled trials work, they are only designed for the stereotype, mostly an adult, cis, white male person. But the DIY community has taught us that one size does not fit all, and all of the options and overrides that you can put in a DIY system are super relevant. And I think this is something that the industry can learn from the DIY community as well. We've discussed different insulin models earlier. I wouldn't know that you can change the absorption curve in commercial systems as far as I'm informed, but we all know this is all crucial. Otherwise, a closed loop system cannot work properly. If you get bullshit in, you get bullshit out. Free for all. Needless to say, you all know this, the source code is available openly, globally, even if we have commercial systems that are approved in, let's say, Germany, a couple of European countries, and the US. There are many, many more people in the world that live with type 1. And for them, DIY looping is the only option on how to get hold of a closed loop system. And talk ethics. If I remember when I studied in medical school 12, 13 years ago, and I was a first year medical student, I had to learn all of this and I have not forgotten it. And the 4 baseline values of medical ethics are the perfect case study for DIY APS, because they say non-maleficence, first, do no harm. Beneficence, a practitioner should always act in the best interest of the patient. Respect for their autonomy, that the patient has the right to refuse or choose their own treatment, and then justice and equity. I don't think I have to say anymore, but DIY APS completely, I can only support it. Because what does not change in my daily experience as a clinician is that the doctor and patient relationship is still built on trust and empathy. That should be always in place, disregarding if it's an open source loop system or some other form of therapy. And shared decision-making should always be there. Education and training is still important. We still have to adjust settings as we go, and support with school, work, and travels, that will still be necessary, which is why I think DIY APS replaces the device and not the doctor. Same as with artificial intelligence. I don't think I will be replaced by AI one day, but I think the doctor with AI will be replaced. No, the doctor without AI will be replaced by the doctor with AI. Now it makes sense. But what is likely to change is that a complete data set will be available. There won't be any question marks looking for data gaps. It's all there. Finally, empowered people that get enough sleep, that have a good quality of life, with better A1Cs, better time and ranges, less hypos. And also my own understanding of diabetes as a doctor has changed quite a lot after I've started looping and since I'm working with open and look at a lot of data. Here, for example, are the basal rates at night from one of my friends who's also a doctor. Some of these nights he's been on call, some of these nights he's been asleep. And you can see that the CGM curves are totally different. And also the insulin delivery is totally different every day. And all of this stuff like insulin profiles, circadian basal rates, and so forth, that's been an illusion really. Every day is different. And I also got a more dynamic understanding of the human body. I no longer think in tables and numbers, but in carbs on board, insulin on board. And I have all of this in mind, even when I put a patient on MDI in the hospital now. And now I would like to share a couple of things about the guidelines that we're working on. I'm sure you all know Rehan Lal. I think he's held talks here at the Zoom meeting before. And this is something we're also doing at Open. We are currently about to put together an international network of healthcare professionals that have experience with DIY APS. And together we're working on a consensus statement for the safe and ethical use of DIY APS from a healthcare professional perspective. And at the moment, we already have 25 countries from all regions represented. And the document that we're working on will also be fact-checked by lawyers. and will be endorsed by professional organizations. At the moment, we're talking with the ADA, with ISPAD, with JDRF, with the board of the German Diabetes Associations and many, many other locals with IDF. And we're aiming to submit the paper in January, and very, very proud to share that this will be published in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology. So as you can see, we're doing research at a top level, just like our friends doing research with Medtronic and Tandem and so forth. And the lead authors working on this with us are Rehan from Stanford and Sufyan from London. They're all looping. And if one of your doctors should join this team, then please let them know. They can get in touch with us. They can be part of this network as well. We're also getting everyone's opinions. Yeah, and would like to extend the group and make it even more international. So hashtag we're not waiting. What are you waiting for? Help researchers and industry to learn from the DIY community now so that they can develop products with people with diabetes and not for. Commercial solutions will be available, but only to some. And one size does not fit all. And every day with a better diabetes management counts. If you want to support us, please visit our website. It's open-diabetes.eu, where you can join our survey, and there will be instructions in place on how you can share your data with you. Everything is completely anonymous. None of this will be used for commercial purposes. It's open data. That means it's not only for the open team, but also for future researchers that would like to do science with that. And the survey will still be open for the rest of the month. And having said this, I would like to thank our amazing team. And if you want to follow us or get in touch with us, here's how. Here's our email, our website, our Twitter handle. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And even if you're a researcher or a developer and you would like to do volunteer work with us, or if you're looking for work at the moment, then please also let us know. We're looking forward to your messages.
Katarina, I just have one question, please. A lot of us, at least here in the US, were involved with the JABE study, which went over about, I think, 18 months. And we got requests every week to fill out a survey. Are you doing something like that to keep us involved and connected and aware that you're still doing something?
No, our model is a bit different. We have only one survey in place. And once you have synchronized your looping system with Open Humans, it will be live uploading, especially if you're using Night Scout. It will be like a live feed of data, but it's only one survey. It's a bit lengthy, I have to say, and it has multiple components. You can, for example, invite your partner. You can invite your healthcare professionals to validate your clinical data at a later stage of the study. But it's not every week, so don't worry.
How do we know that our data is actually feeding?
You can, if you've been using Open Humans before, once you authorize the team to access your data, you should appear in the group of data donators. So you have a nickname. We don't want to know who you are, but you will appear in the project. And if you have any doubts if it's working, then get in touch with us and we will check.
Okay, so how long are you continuing to enroll people in your study?
The survey, including the quality of life and sleep quality questionnaires, will be available until the end of the month. But we are thinking about keeping the survey open for other sub-projects, such as the part where you can invite your doctor for much, much longer. So it's probably going to be open a bit longer. We don't know yet about when we're going to close it. But if you want the full experience and invite your partner and share your sleep quality with us, then until the end of the month.
That is great. I'll repost it. And if any one of you want to post it again on SoCal Loopers, we'll take as many times as you post it, because you never know when you're going to catch someone who'll go, oh, I'll sign up today. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Joanne, if I may, I'll jump in here, but I'll keep it really, really short. So I think Katarina's presentation, as always, has been quite exhaustive, and I think she's gone into the whole experience from her personal story to what we do at Open and how it all comes together. So I don't think there should be too many open questions, but if there are, I'm sure she'll be happy to take it afterwards. I want to make 3-4 very quick points here. So as I said in the beginning, I'm not a researcher. I don't even loop myself. I joined this project for a bit of a different reason, which is I'm a diplomat by training. I used to work in foreign and security policy on the Middle East mostly. I lived in Lebanon and Syria for many years, worked in Brussels, worked for the UN in New York, etc. And you know, sometimes in these kind of worlds, you ask yourself why things take so long and they don't come together, while common sensual, everything seems so simple, you know? And it's a bit sometimes the same in healthcare and research, right? So Tim has made an excellent presentation about the n=1 and what he's been able to find out from very, very early on. And everybody listening here, or most people listening here, I assume, are looping or are very close to looping or have a lot of experience in this. So on the n=1 level, doing a lot of research around this might almost seem like, why are you even doing this? We know this works. We hear this quite a lot from the people we send this massive survey to. It is really a bit tedious. I'll get to that in a minute. So, you know, we loop, we've seen it, we've seen the magic it does, and it's not actually anymore n=1. We know there's thousands, there's more than 10,000 people using one of the different open source systems out there right now. And for all of them, we have these stories, and we've seen them in our first study, more than 1,000 responses, more than 1,000 of these great stories we've collected. So why do we do research on this, right? Common sense tells you you don't need this, we know, right? But here's the thing. We always say language matters. Well, we have to take ourselves, we have to be accountable to our own standards. Language matters also to others. It matters to HCPs. It matters to organizations like the FDA in the US or the EMA here in Europe. Language matters, and that in their terminology means science matters. They don't care for your n=1. They don't even care for your 10,000 times n=1 works. Because for them, what we post on social media or our individual lived experiences, it's still not enough. For them, even 10,000 times n=1 is not 10,000, it's still 10,000 times n=1. And that's not something they will base any of their more formal decisions on, because this is what we're looking at, formal processes. They do take time, and they are based on science, and science that is evaluated and science that is proven by sometimes a bit, from our perspective, maybe outdated standards and outdated measures. But this is what matters to them. Language matters, science matters. So how do we get them to listen to us? How do we get them to believe in what we already know is true for us? And this is where things like the BMJ or the Lancet or ATTD, ADA, EASD come in, because this is the voices and the publications and the research they do read and they do care for and they do listen to. Point number one. Point number two, Katarina already mentioned that. We don't do this for industry, but we definitely don't do it against industry. We want to work with industry in all that we do. We often get the question, and we just had it today, Katarina and I, we had a large German newspaper similar to the Financial Times in the US call us, and they asked us, because we just recently, a week ago, won the German Digital Health Award. They asked us, so why is your system better? And I corrected the journalist and said, we're not claiming our systems are better. In a way, they are, like right now, our algorithms might perform better than the ones we have seen coming to market, but we're definitely not claiming that we have the better programmers or that we're smarter or that we know more than the huge teams working for some of these huge international companies with so much funding. You know, that would just not be right. The reality is we play by different rules, or rather we don't play by the rules that these industry people have to play by. And that completely changes what we do. the industry people would probably be happy to be not bound by the rules that we are not bound by, but they are. So we have to always, I think, in our language, again, be careful to not make these claims and say we are smarter, we are better, we have the better algorithms, because trust me, in their research deep down, not coming to market, they have figured this all out already. They have looked at our algorithms, they have studied the same things, and I'm sure they could do that tomorrow in a really, really, really good way. But they have to play by certain rules. So what are we doing with the research? Why do we do this? We do this to push regulatory boundaries. And this is what matters. If we have 10,000 people doing this and we get this individual NQL1 experience into journals like BMJ, Lancet, and to congresses like EASD, ADA, ATTD, etc., we're pushing regulatory boundaries because we show that it's working. We show it in a language and on the science level that works. And this will make industry, it will enable industry to maybe play by a little bit less rules. And therefore they will become as good as we already maybe are, but they will hopefully be able to do it even better. It's about trust, it's about safety, it's about efficiency, but most of all, it's about removing some of these boundaries, these regulatory and liability boundaries, so that industry can follow us. We're maybe the wave breakers. We're leading this, but we need them and we want them to follow. So third point, what do we do in open? Actually, and some might not like to hear this, but a lot of the things we are going to ask you about in these surveys, and a lot of the stuff we do in the open project, is not that new. It's not that we are reinventing the wheel. We kind of just do the same questions again in a different format that is respected by the big guys that will eventually make decisions that will then enable industry to follow and bring these solutions to more people than we as a community ever could. So we do things in a bit different way. There is one big difference, and that matters. The big difference is that the science we do and the research we do is led by us. I mean, by people like us from the community. So by people like Katarina, like Rayan, like, like more than half of the people in the open project, the researchers, the doctors, the social science researchers, even the programmers, even our communications person, Saskia, who's here on the call, they all live with type 1 and most of them loop. That makes a profound difference on how we maybe do research, but it's still kind of old-fashioned research in a way. It's led by us. We are always talking about patient-driven innovation in the looping community. This is patient-driven science. And this science, because it is patient-driven, has now been backed by almost €1 million grant by the European Union. That also, that stamp with the blue banner with the stars, it makes such a difference, again, on the credibility front. This is why this is important. And this is why I want to make this call to action again to all of you here and everybody watching. Please take your time. Please do this survey. I know it's tedious. I know it's a lot of questions we're asking. It does take, if I'm optimistic, I'd say half an hour. Probably it's going to be a little bit more for some who are new to that kind of word. Please take your time and do this. And yes, it is tedious. And yes, it's a lot of questions. And yes, you have to then afterwards, please connect your looping system to Open Humans, and then make sure that Open Humans is connected to the open project, and make sure it is work. But it is important that you participate. It is also important that you give us feedback if something doesn't work. It will matter. And Joanne, in the very beginning, you talked about impact. And of course, we can become bigger as a community and make 20,000 people use open source, or 30,000 people use open source, and every single one matters. But what will really matter in the long term is to push these boundaries and make industry play along and become as good as we are in this field. This is where impact is really happening. This is where change happens. And this is why we need you to come along. Now, the last thing, and I know some of you will not like this, but I'm a diplomat. You said I will be diplomatic, so I'll put this diplomatic lightly. But here's the thing, and this is my personal opinion. My personal opinion is, if we succeed in pushing these boundaries, then we are not waiting, at least in this context, will become obsolete. because this is where we started, right? We started with this cry, we are not waiting. We don't want to wait no more for industry to come. We don't want to wait no more for industry to bring us these solutions that we know can be done. Although back then when we started saying that, we didn't know it's going to work, but then we started figuring it out, right? So if we can come to a point where hashtag we are not waiting changes to we are not waiting because we don't have to anymore. That's when I say, check, mission accomplished. And I know some don't like to hear that because we're also invested in the community, but for me, the most impactful outcome of all of what we do would be that we are in a way obsolete and no longer necessary in this. And then last point, the question will become, we will not become obsolete, but it will maybe become obsolete to do this kind of research and push the boundaries for closed loop systems because they are there. Miraculously, suddenly they are there. The question is then, what's the next challenge? And this is what I think is going to be really, really interesting. I told you in the beginning, I was for many years, and I still am in a way, although I'm now on a pump, I'm a huge fan of MDI. One of the reasons I am that is because that is what is available to 99% of the people out there. And I'm not looking at California or the US or Europe right now. I'm looking at Africa, India, I'm looking at all these countries, but even in Europe and even in the US, you know how many people have no access to sensors, have no access to pumps, have no access to, it's great that the code is for free, but if you don't have a pump, if you don't have a sensor, it's not gonna work, right? So what can we learn from what we've been doing over the last 5+ years for MDI? How can we develop open source free algorithms that maybe work for someone using a pen somewhere in Africa or India or in Europe or in the US, in California, because this is still the majority. It will remain the majority. And this is going to be the next boundary because there the same thing will apply. There will be rules in place. There will be regulation in place. Companies will be scared of bringing stuff to market that they may consider not safe. But maybe we can start doing N=1 again. We can start trying things out. And I know some of you already are. And we can push the boundaries again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian. You're getting a lot of feedback saying it's just 1 hour. I think of it as at least 1 hour of more sleep that we get donated back to you to do the survey. It's a really interesting survey. It's worth your time. And I'm going to encourage everyone in SoCal Loopers to please encourage your friends to do this survey. Make sure, just spread the word, an organic growth to make sure everyone is actually contributing here. That's how we get things done. You're absolutely right. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate what you folks are doing. If people want to volunteer, what are the opportunities and what would we do?
You mean what will we do as a community?
And what would we do to get in touch with you and let you know?
Oh,
that we're interested?
Just go to our website, open-diabetes.eu. You will find all the information there. There's a direct link into the survey. There's the gateway that will route you to the parts of the survey that are relevant for you, depending on whether you're an adult or a parent or a teenager or a child or a doctor who wants to, maybe HCP who wants to participate, or a partner of somebody with. It's as I said, this whole thing is not, it is led by people like us. It is patient-led innovation and patient-led research, but it's done in the most meticulous way. It runs on RedCap, on Charité servers in Germany. It's all very well figured out. Go to the website. I think it doesn't leave a lot of questions open. If there are questions, send us whatever you want. Send us a Facebook message, send us a tweet, send us an email. Saskia is there to support. I see her already writing in the chat. She's our most amazing. She's kind of the face of the German looper community in a way, together with many, many others, of course, but she was one of the very, very first to do it in Germany. She is very much into supporting. She runs many of the support groups in Germany. Saskia, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us on the Open team, but also for being here in the call. Just get in touch. We'll figure it out.
So is your survey open? I'm picking this up from Saskia, that you don't have to be a looper to fill out your survey.
No, exactly. There's actually a huge part also for people who are not or not yet looping. In science, you call this, it's a bit like a reference group if you want, but it's also because we have a working package towards the European Union that is specifically interested in what are the barriers. If there's something that's free to use, why isn't everybody doing this, right? And we all know there is barriers. Like, as I said, you need a pump, you need a sensor, but there may be other things that are more on the mental side. Like I said, I myself am currently not on a DIY system. Why is that so? Doesn't that sound weird to the rest of you here on the call, who probably all of you are? Well, I can give you my honest answer. For me, I don't want to say it's too difficult to figure it out. No, it's not. I know, I mean, I've been trying this, I've been in this group, I know all this, but I personally have a different preference. So we want to know about these kind of things. We want to know what are your preferences. We want to know why maybe you consciously decide, although you know about Loop, to not use it. And we also want to know that why, maybe if you want to use it, why can't you use it? Because these are also important things to know to then maybe have impact and change things.
All right,
So, yes.
I will throw out a challenge to all our US-based SoCal loopers, but certainly worldwide. If you have a partner, if you're married, if you're taking care of children, if grandparents are involved with taking care of your kids, please share the survey with them. If you are on other Facebook groups that are not purely DIY looping, share it with them. Let's see if we can bring some groundswell to the open project from across the pond.
And last point, just because I see some questions here, there is a question about which topics other than filling in the survey is demand for volunteers in open. Well, we have a work package we haven't even really started, which is on machine learning. So we're still looking for experts, preferably people living with Type 1 and looping, who are knowledgeable from their professional background around machine learning, because I think that's going to be a very, very interesting thing to do. And there's another thing here, a comment from Phil about, we learned from the JEB study that looping is predominantly white, college educated and not poor. Yes, this is why we are also targeting the not looping community with the survey, because these are some of the things we are finding out already. And we want to hear these voices. We want to hear what we as a community have to do to make this kind of stuff accessible to people who are not white and college educated and have the resources and the capacity. How do we make the barriers go down?
All right, I have one more question for both of you, because I've been asking this as we have some professionals talking with us. With DIY, and it doesn't have to be, I'm sorry, with looping, it doesn't have to be DIY. There's an issue of data analysis, and it's an immediate and ongoing need to review and notice, and a lot of us use Night Scout, but our healthcare professionals don't know how to do it, don't know how to give us information. How do you see that being addressed? I know it's not quite on topic with Open Project, but will these be done by expert systems? Will there be a whole new class of healthcare professionals who are not medically trained, but data trained?
That's a very good question. I can tell from my personal experience that data analysis is absolutely underestimated in clinical care right now. I started to implement Tidepool in our hospital, but until then we did not really have routine data assessments, and I couldn't believe when I started my residency that it is like that. But it's probably the same. I mean, we're the biggest university hospital in entire Europe. It's probably the same in many places. It's something that is not considered enough. I know there's software that is trying to get the data analyzed so that a healthcare professional can understand it right away, so that people with diabetes can understand it right away. But it is for sure an area we need improvement on. Our guidelines will have a chapter on data analysis and assessment for sure. But yeah, you're completely right. It's also very hard to find good data scientists, even for researchers. Tell all of your children to become data scientists in the future. It's a safe work field.
Well, it's an interesting problem, because some of the data scientists are not authorized deal with medical data, and they certainly can't bill for their time. And so it looks like it would fall to expert systems who are not human beings, but programmed by human beings. But I don't see that answer yet. But I think it's coming on like gangbusters as there are more and more closed loop users in the world. So I thank you guys so very much. It's been outstanding, and we've all learned a lot, and we will be talking, we will be sending out as much information as we possibly can. You've been remarkable. So thank you. Thank you. I hope you all have a good evening wherever you are, and a good day for the rest of you in the US. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.